SBS studios across the nation. This is the feed for Tuesday, the 25th of February 2014. Mark Fennell is my name. And also coming up, would you wear or ask your partner to wear an electrified condom? Because it turns out people do, because people are weird. But first, let's have a look at what went down in the world today. Prime Minister Tony Abbott has flagged he may want to make changes to health and education spending.
We will keep our pre-election commitments to maintain health spending and school spending, but we must reduce the rate of spending growth. In the longer term, if debt is to be paid off and good schools and hospitals are to be sustainable.
The opposition were quick to jump on any possible cuts today and is blaming the government for blaming them for pretty much everything else.
The problem with this Abbott government is they're an opposition in drag. Whatever the question, their answer is to try and blame the previous government.
Next up, the US Army is making like a man's genitalia in a cold ocean and shrinking. The Pentagon has announced plans to reduce the US Army to pre-World War II levels to meet the new 2015 spending caps. The caps will reduce the size of the Army and their military benefits, as well as kill off an old but popular fleet of planes. These kinds of cuts have been proposed in the past, but they never passed Congress, or they usually get rejected because they're unpopular during election years. But Obama's in his second and final term, and so this time it might be a bit different. US Defence Secretary Chuck Hagel said although some of the cuts were tough, they plan to continue the focus down to the Asia-Pacific region whilst winding down their involvement in Afghanistan, and they no longer need such a large land army. And to Brazil, where a company is trying to force people to sit down and actually interact with each other over a beer instead of just staring at our phones. Weirdos.
Smartphones in a bar. Yeah, a problem that affects the whole world.
Even though it is all one big ad for some provincial Brazilian beer you've never heard of, the idea is kind of interesting. It's a beer cooler that acts a bit like a James Bond gadget and blocks all mobile signals within a few metre radius. So, no Twitter, no Instagram, no Facebook, no Candy Crush. Basically, you're going to have to nominate each other the old-fashioned way, under the crippling first-person peer pressure of the human being physically next to you. The test run of the cooler resulted in everyone liking it heaps, probably because they were super drunk, because they weren't able to pace themselves with the odd well-timed selfie. Next up, the Mars 1 mission hopes to boldly go where no one has gone before, and where no Muslim will ever go if Islamic authorities in the UAE ever get their way. The Mars 1 program is calling for people to sign up for a one-way trip to colonise the Red Planet in 2022. Now, there's no doubt that a trip to Mars would pose some threat to your life, but according to the General Authority of Islamic Affairs and Endowment, it's also a threat to your afterlife. So much so that they've issued a fatwa against Mars 1. The Islamic Authority believe the trip is basically suicide, and any Muslims who undertake it will suffer the same punishment for that sin in the afterlife. Mars 1 has countered, asking for the fatwa to be lifted, saying the Quran encourages Muslims to go out and seek the signs of God's creation in heaven and earth. So far, over 200,000 people have signed up for the mission, and if they ever get there, let's hope there's a mosque on Mars.
Allahu Akbar.
And finally, strap on your unlicensed nuclear accelerator and prepare to get a big dose of the feels. Harold Ramis, the comedian behind classic comedies like Animal House and Groundhog Day, has died at the naturally comedic age of 69. He was famous for teaching millions of filmgoers the importance of anarchy and comedy, and for teaching a class full of immigrants the importance of 1960s pop songs.
I met her on a Monday and my heart stood still.
Ramis got his start in the comedy troupe Second City, where he fast became head writer and there was one of the founding members of National Lampoon. Unlike his boisterous animated co-stars John Candy, Bill Murray and John Belushi, Ramis was generally seen as the sort of academic rather than a clown.
In every gang you've ever seen on TV or in films, there's always a character who's called the Professor or Doc or Specs, you know. So I'm Specs, you know. The guy with the glasses is supposed to be smarter, so I get that kind of respect.
Do you have any hobbies?
I collect spores, molds, and fungus.
Ramis was nothing short of a comedy giant, and not just for the films he wrote, directed and starred in, but also for the comedians he inspired, Adam Sandler and Judd Apatow, just to name a few. But what can you say about his incredible career that hasn't already been said?
Spectacular? No, that's been said.
Inspiring? No, that's been said too. Moving, exciting, thrilling. You hear those all the time.
Oh, goodbye, Mr. Amos. May your stripes fly high, your shack be frequently caddied, and your ghost remain unbusted. And don't forget, this Sunday night here on SBS2, the Sydney Mardi Gras will be airing, and today, the Deputy Opposition Leader, Tanya Plibersek, introduced a private member's bill aimed at legalising gay marriage. But there are places around the world where it is far worse to be gay, and there was some particularly disturbing news that came out of Uganda overnight, and Andy Park has more.
These were the scenes in recent weeks. Gay rights protests outside the Ugandan embassy in neighbouring Kenya calling for Uganda to repeal laws banning homosexuality. And yesterday, celebrations in the Ugandan parliament. Even President Museveni himself, previously hesitant to further laws, made bold statements over gay rights.
That is why I have agreed to sign the bill.
But listen again, listen more closely.
Even now I have not really fully understood it. That you can fail to be attracted to all these beautiful women and you are attracted by a man. That's a very serious matter.
Right. So Uganda's actually taken a step backwards rather than forwards in recognition of gay rights. Utterly primitive, according to some. But wait until you hear the penalties that now apply in the country of 36 million. Homosexuality was already prohibited in Uganda, but after some so-called scientific advice, the new law signed by President Museveni overnight goes further, outlawing the promotion of homosexuality and requiring citizens to denounce anyone suspected of being gay to the police. Lesbians are now included for the first time, and repeat offenders can face life in prison. The bill very nearly included the death penalty.
I don't think that homosexuality is a human right.
There are 10 countries where homosexual acts can still be punishable by death. There are 67 countries where homosexual acts are illegal. There are 17 countries where same-sex marriage is now legal. And 83 countries where homosexual acts are legal, but some restrictions may apply. Sadly, this latest move may have more to do with the President wanting to assert independence in the face of Western pressure, as well as galvanising support for traditional African values in a deeply religious and conservative nation.
We don't want anybody to interfere in our internal affairs.
We are undertaking a review of our relationship with Uganda in light of this decision.
But the decision has been popular in the country.
They're not going to share the same sex, so we support our president for that. And we thank him for signing on that bill.
There's been allegations that touring American evangelists were the ones to whip up support for the bill. Uganda is the recipient of massive aid budgets from the West. $400 million alone comes from Washington each year. Several nations are now pulling out or reviewing their donations to the country. You see, it's feared that these cuts may impact on the welfare and education programs that are helping the gay community in Uganda, making their 1.5 million sufferers of HIV and AIDS far less likely to come forward and get the help they need.
Thank you, Andy. And all this afternoon we've been asking you what action you would like to see the international community take against countries with harsh anti-gay laws, if any at all. Let us know what you reckon on Twitter using that hashtag, the feed SBS2, just like Jake did. Jake reckons we can mind our own business. There's plenty of problems in our own backyard to worry about, whilst Robert reckons we should take the same actions that were taken against South Africa during apartheid. We're talking sanctions, protests, exclusion from global events. Or just to mix it up a little bit, there's the third option here, which is kidnap all of their leaders and duct tape them to the most lavish rainbow floats at the Mardi Gras. Thank you for that, Bianca. Another great one that just came in, we should export en masse box sets of Will and Grace. If you've got a better idea than that, or if you just want to show us your best Just Jack impression, you can hit us up on the SBS2 Facebook page, and we will be back in a minute.